Hey! Fashions from Zellers. Hey! New clothes from Zellers. Hey!
Safeway's got it.
Count on Safeway to have all your favorite national name brands.
Safeway's got it.
And look for quality Safeway brands in each and every department.
Safeway's got it.
Plus, Safeway's own unique line of products without brand names. So whether you're stocking up or starting up, remember Safeway's got it.
Safeway's got it. Safeway's got it. BCTV, together we'll have the best year yet.
Good morning. You all know and recall Norman Fox. You met him first in this program. He is the man who did 8.5 years in jail for a rape he didn't do. He's here this morning. There wasn't that much sympathy for him at the time because previously he had been in for a rape that he did do. But a commission gave him $275,000 in damages for the injustice done to him, with the rider that he must in some way assist his first rape victim. He's here this morning. You all know Alec Macdonald. He's the man in the kilt, not today. Former Attorney General who has prepared what I think may be his swan song. In his long and distinguished association with the New Democratic Party, he'd much rather be back in the old CCF, and he's written a book about it. And you all know the indefatigable, that's a good word, the indefatigable Claire Culhane. Many of you, she annoys many of you. She drives me round the bend at times. But nevertheless, every society needs a Claire Culhane because she takes up the causes of injustice done to people behind bars, and some of us to pretend, or would rather back off and forget about these individuals. And she's put it down on paper too, and the book is called Still Barred from Prison. But it's Norman Fox we'll start with after the break. Norman Fox is 49. Norman Fox is still on welfare. Norman Fox has obtained an award of $275,000 from a special commissioner set up by the Attorney General, Brian Smith, to see what compensation he should get for what is now widely and broadly and legally and properly admitted as wrongful imprisonment for 8.5 years for a rape he didn't do. Is that a good summary?
That's about it, Jack, yes.
Why haven't you got the money?
I have no idea. I think the government is dragging its heels. Of course, the mediation process between the lawyers, my lawyers, and the lawyer for the first victim
Now,
has to go on.
There was a provision, was there not? I gave some of the background, but I'll restate it. In 1960, you went to jail for life for a brutal rape.
That's right.
And how long did you serve?
12 years.
12 years. And when you got out, you were clean.
Yes.
What happened after that, briefly? When did the second conviction come about?
1976.
And that was
in the spring of 1976.
And that was an allegation believed that, which the Crown thought was proven, which sent you off again for 10 years.
That's right.
How did you get out?
Well, I actually sent me back for life because with the second conviction, I started a life sentence all over again.
You must have felt great at that time.
Sure.
How did you beat it?
I beat it because a group of my friends got together, worked for about 4 years to find the evidence to clear me. Once that evidence was found, it was sent to the Minister of Justice, the new Minister of Justice, John Crosby. They had just been elected at that time, and I was pardoned.
He pardoned you?
Yeah.
I remember saying to you before that I felt it was a pity it hadn't come back to the courts here so you could be cleared in the courts, which is better than a pardon from a Minister of Justice.
I agree, absolutely.
Now, I must raise the subject. The victim of your, I hate to use the word, of your convicted rape, later had an accident and suffered brain damage.
Yes.
What do you want to do for that woman? out of this $275,000?
Well, I think you're
compensation?
confusing two different people, Jack. The 1976 person is the one who had the car accident and the brain damage, not the first one.
My mistake.
Yeah, it was a 1976
Well,
person.
delete that bit and I'll ask the question simply. What do you think should be done for the victim of your legitimate rape?
I said at the hearing, and I've said since publicly, that I accept the responsibility. I think it's a moral debt that I owe, and I'm willing to discharge that debt. And that's what's being negotiated now between the lawyers.
Your lawyer, Terry Robertson.
Yes.
And the government's lawyer?
The victim's lawyer, Bob Plummer.
Bob Plummer.
Right.
And are they presently in actually
negotiation.
negotiation?
They're negotiating back and forth about that.
And you got the award when?
I think it was the end of August or the middle of August.
1985?
Yes.
And meanwhile, you've got to live on welfare until this is negotiated
That's right.
and an arrangement
Right.
made. Well, do you get a bad response? You know, lots of people say, well, if they hadn't let him out parole the first time, he couldn't have been wrongfully convicted the second time. Do you get animosity from the public when they recognize you as they must?
Very little. You know, the general public simply don't have that attitude. I found they're very fair and very compassionate. I've been stopped on the street countless times by people wishing me well.
Now, however, the door is closed and you're starting a new life once this negotiated amount is set for the victim.
Yes, that's right.
Well, how about your book?
It's coming along. It's going to take time, Jack. You know, people have told me you've got to separate yourself from the event, and it's, you know, I'm pretty close to it now. It's still going on. And I think I'll put some, after it's over, I'll put some time between myself and this and get on with it. I'm writing as I go along, keeping notes and so on. The book will come.
Maybe there should be a general law that everybody who is cleared of a wrongful conviction should have automatic compensation for time spent in jail.
Well, I think that's one of the unfortunate parts of Commissioner McFarland's report. He didn't deal with that. He refused to deal with it. He said that each case has to be dealt with individually, but there are certain general procedures that I think can be laid down, and I think they should be legislated.
Now, apart from the fact that there was a proviso, you had to make some agreed compensation to the victim.
Yes.
Was there not? Didn't you want a whole lot more money in the first instance?
Sure.
How much did you want first time around?
I think the figure was 1.5 million. And that came at a point when we had no contact with the Attorney General. The only time we heard from the Attorney General was in the press. And he eventually asked me to set a price on freedom, on my personal freedom. There are no precedents in Canada of this type. And the only precedent,
Donald Marshall.
Yeah, but that didn't go to a hearing. That never went to a compensation hearing. That was settled prior to the hearing.
Donald Marshall was a Nova Scotia case where the youngster was finally cleared of a murder which involved an older man. How much did Donald Marshall get?
$270,000.
So you topped him by $5,000 for the
Yes.
record books, $275,000. Did you have to give a proviso as you accepted this deal, that you would not sue the police for wrongful prosecution?
Just let me straighten that out. While I have tentatively and verbally accepted that settlement, it's far from settled. I have to wait, Jack, until everybody gets a piece of the pie, and I'll see what's left after that. So that I haven't signed anything. I haven't signed any agreement. That agreement that I've made with my lawyers is being put to the other side. And if they accept that, fine. If they don't, it's going to have to be rethought out from there.
In other words, if there's a mediated agreement for the amount that the victim should get between your lawyers and the other lawyers, that will be accepted as fact by you.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. What, for example, if the other side demands $200,000?
Well, that's why there's mediation, so that common sense comes into the picture. And that,
Well, common sense doesn't always prevail, Jack. You know,
what you're saying is that if the victim got too much, you might launch a civil suit for damages against the police or the crown,
Absolutely.
or for whomsoever
Yeah,
you can believe
absolutely.
you can blame for the wrongful conviction.
Yeah, at first, when I learned that I would have to give up my right to file a suit against the police or carry on the suit because the suit's already filed, I did a great deal of thinking about that because to me, money is not the issue. Justice is the issue. And if we find a just resolution to the thing, that's great.
The money becomes the issue if it's not a just settlement in your eyes.
Sure, yeah.
So are you telling me, and I don't want to confuse the issue, Norman, are you telling me that if the settlement is not satisfactory to you, you will walk away and launch a civil suit?
That's right, or I'll carry on the civil suit.
Carry on the civil suit. Oh, I thought it had all been signed, sealed, and delivered, that this was it, game over, no suits,
no way.
mediation division.
The government's still sitting on that money. They haven't made any attempt, Jack, to offer me something to get me on my feet, to take me off welfare. Absolutely nothing. They're dragging their feet, and I can only speculate as to the reasons for that. Certainly, while the mediation is going on, and the negotiation is going on between the lawyers, certainly they could give me something to
tie me by,
sure.
Because you're going to get some of the $275,000.
Certainly.
What do you think of the way they're treating Fox? Your calls after the break. Norman, you've been on welfare since you came out of jail.
Yes.
Since you were freed.
That's right.
Did at any time, said Webster in his best legal manner, Human Resources ever stop your welfare?
When they learned that I had refused, at the beginning I'd refused the settlement for the reason that I would have to give up my right to sue the police. They cut me off then. They called me down to welfare and said that since I had refused that money, that was contrary to welfare regulations, and cut me off.
When were you returned to welfare?
After my lawyer, Terry Robertson, phoned Victoria and had it straightened out. They had it straightened out within a half an hour, as a matter of fact.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine that.
Sure.
Some lower-level bureaucrat doing his
so.
best to put the heat on you.
Sure.
And I don't think there was a conspiracy there.
I'm not so certain there was a lower-level Democrat or bureaucrat.
Bureaucrat. You're inclined to look for the Machiavellian conspiracy in any case, and you're not.
Sure.
Because you think you were framed, and I think you were just wrongfully convicted.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes, I do think I was framed.
There is a difference in
Big
my
difference.
interpretation.
Big difference.
The fact was, the end result was you went to jail for a crime you didn't do, and no matter how it was done, it was damnable.
That's right.
Right. Go ahead to Norman Fox.
With all respect, Mr. Fox, when your welfare problems, have you tried to get a job?
Yes, I've tried many, many times to get a job. I'm always looking for a job.
She's put her down as not too sympathetic to you. Go ahead, please.
That's me.
That's you.
Yeah, Mr. Fox, do you think you owe society any refund for the cost of keeping you for the first conviction? You were PC, which is extra cost, you know.
Keeping me for the first conviction, the first 12 years?
That's right.
I certainly don't think I owe society anything after that.
You don't think there's any cost involved in keeping people of your status or nature of that crime in
We only ask debtors to pay. We used to ask debtors to pay the cost of the time in prison. Society has prisons to protect itself. I don't think that's a reasonable argument against Norman Fox. Do you?
No, I don't, Jack.
Fact was that you had, to use an old Scotch phrase, "thold your assize." You'd been charged, convicted, sentenced, and the system freed you. You'd paid your debt to society.
Yes.
Then you were wrongfully convicted. No matter how you think of it, you gotta remember these basic facts. It could happen to you tomorrow, even if you didn't have a previous conviction, if the system gets sloppy. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
That me?
That's you.
I was just wondering about the same thing as the last caller, whether he has got to try to get out of the job, and why doesn't he give the whole issue to the lady he raped in the first case?
Why don't I give everything to her?
Indeed. For asking for justice, she should have justice too.
The amount being given to that person is being negotiated between the lawyers. I really have nothing to do with that. I have to accept whatever settlement
Whatever
is made.
that settlement is made,
it.
and then you'll decide whether or not you should continue with the civil suit.
Sure.
Fair enough. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. I'd like to know, you keep saying that the man was wrongly convicted, but the only thing I've heard is that the man was given a pardon. To give a man a pardon doesn't say that he didn't do it.
Well, now that's a quibble which I'm sure Norman will take up.
In the pardon that was issued to me by the Minister of Justice, they declared me innocent of the crime.
where was a court that said you're innocent? On a Ministry of Justice, that's an individual.
They never did
We're
it
judged
through
by
the courts.
12. We're not. We don't have people like you running around telling us what the law is.
They never did go through the courts. They
Norman
issued it,
is being factually accurate when he tells you that in the pardon document at that time, I can almost remember the name of the official, it was stated that he was innocent of the crime to which he had been charged. As I've said, and I think Norman agrees, it would have been better had he been sent back to the courts to be cleared. The government chose to do it this way, and that ain't his fault.
as I asked them to do on a number of occasions, Jack.
Thank
Send
you.
it back to the courts.
Go ahead, please.
Is that me?
That's you.
Yeah, I was wondering, this settlement you're talking about, would that be a money settlement there?
$270,000 less than agreed share to the victim of his offense, which was many years ago.
Yeah, the offense he committed, he's going to give her a money settlement.
There's going to be a negotiated agreement between lawyers for her and lawyers for Norman on the proviso put in it by Mr. Justice Med McFarlane, retired from the Court of Appeal.
So she will get some of that money?
Yes, she will.
So you don't know, that implies money for a sexual act.
No, don't be silly. You're going on a stupid tack. I'll cut you off. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm calling about that one caller that said that he has to reimburse us for the keeping of him. I think being locked up for that length of time is enough of a punishment for anybody. But I'd also like to say that why is it that when somebody like Mr. Olson steps into the picture and wants an amount of money, they pay up right away, and this man is sitting there and he has been wrongfully treated by the government, and they seem to sit on their laurels and not do anything about it and rectify their mistakes.
The Olson case is one of the scars on the face and the record of Canadian justice.
Oh, definitely.
We're not going to get into that one. Which one am I on? Did I kill the wrong one? Oh, that was one. Sorry. Go ahead, please.
That's me?
That's you, ma'am.
Okay. Well, to begin with, I am with Norm, and I feel that he should get compensated for all the time that he was spent in jail and was wrongly convicted. I haven't been there enough myself. But my question is, being as good looking as you are, Norman, why did you have to rape somebody to begin with?
Oh, do we want to get into that thing?
Well,
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
And that's an indelicate question that's insensitive. I don't want to deal with it, and I reserve the right to edit arbitrarily. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have some admiration for Norman Fox. I think that it's a very difficult sort of thing to do, to have to constantly be in the limelight with all your past and all your mistakes brought up all the time. But I also feel that this point about Norman Fox paying the first victim, I wonder why it's become a legal matter when it should really be a moral matter, because he has already paid for the crime by serving 12 years. And I just don't understand why it's Brian Smith, the Attorney General, has made such a point of it and brought it out to be a legal matter, when to me it should be up to Norman Fox as a moral obligation rather than a legal one.
You're saying that if he wanted to, he should be able to do so. He's paid his crime,
yes,
and that money is given to him for a separate act of injustice done against him by society.
Well, yes, because, I mean, he's paid for his crime. He was...
I think that's a good argument. It wouldn't please some people, but I think that's a valid, sane argument.
Yes, and the other point I wanted to say is that I hope some type of, that Norman Fox is able to pursue it a bit, because I'd like to know if he was convicted, if he was, he says framed, but I'd like to know how a man could be convicted of something he didn't do. I think we should find out, just even for justice, why it happened, and to make sure it doesn't happen again.
That's why I, in the beginning, and I'm still calling for a public inquiry into the conduct of the police in 1976. When an individual in this society commits a wrong, they're very quick to send him to court, convict him, and ship him off to prison and subject him to punishment. My previous crime was splashed across the media in this country from coast to coast. When it came time to talk at the commission about the misdeeds of the police, I wasn't allowed to do that.
You realize, of course, that if it did come to a public inquiry, you might get to the area of reasonable doubt where it might be decided that the jury did the right thing in the face of the terms in front of them.
Well, it wasn't,
and there might be nothing definite in the way of framing.
It wasn't a jury in the first place, but I'm putting to you, Jack, that when that hearing comes up, if and when it comes up, the evidence is there to show that I was framed.
Well, I mean, on a question of broad public principle, we've had incidents in this country where we should have had public inquiries to find out why this went wrong or why that went wrong. And I think you raise a very valid point of a public inquiry, but you won't get it. Not now.
Well, I'm not so certain about that. If I accept that settlement and I sign away my right to sue, there are other avenues I can pursue, and I fully intend to do so.
Another segment of calls with Norman Fox after the break. To Norman Fox. What were the terms of reference given to Mr. Justice Meredith?
The terms of reference drawn up by the provincial government were that he was to look at the compensation for the period of imprisonment, wrongful imprisonment. That's it. We argued that he should take the broad view of those terms of reference, that he should, that the police conduct leading to my arrest and conviction were relevant to compensation. The Attorney General's lawyer argued that no, the terms of reference dealt only and specifically with that period of imprisonment and nothing else.
And that was what was accepted, was it?
That was accepted by the commissioner. That interpretation was accepted by him.
Well, in fact, if the broad investigation had showed some malice, it would have made your compensation bigger.
Sure.
I would think so. What did Friedman do? Remember, he used to be ombudsman here or something.
I made a complaint to Carl Friedman 2 or 3 years ago concerning the identification lineup that led to my arrest. He pursued that complaint and he tried to get the material from, the relevant material from the police and from the Attorney General's office. They wouldn't give it to him. There's a large, long argument about that. He eventually went to the Supreme Court, filed a writ, asking that the court direct the Attorney General and the police to turn over their documents to him. That was rejected by the courts.
So these documents, did Friedman give you the documents?
He hasn't got them. He was never given to them.
So that's the end of that one, eh?
Yes. Yes.
Let's take a few more calls. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Norman Fox there. I was wondering if you believe that in our system of justice we are guilty until we're proven innocent.
That, in terms of people who have a prior record, that's exactly how it works, unfortunately.
In some cases.
Yes.
In people with a prior record, they are presumed guilty until they're proven innocent.
Certainly looked like that in your case when you get a pardon from the Minister of Justice. Go ahead, please.
Referring to the first conviction, I just don't think it's right that a person should pay twice for a crime that they committed.
In other words, do his 12 years and also pay some of the compensation for the time he spent in jail.
Of course it is.
I'm inclined to sympathize with that.
I don't even see how it is that a lawyer can bring that up in a second case.
They brought that up, and that business was accepted by the commissioner, and that was lying completely outside the terms of reference. However, as I said at the time, and I said afterwards, and I'm saying now, I do have a moral responsibility to look after that debt, and I will do so. The only thing I object to is to having that gang of people over there in Victoria dictate morality to me, and I don't think they're clean enough to do that.
Go ahead from Duncan.
Good morning, Mr. Fox.
Good morning.
I really don't feel that you're entitled to that money.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to refresh your memory here a bit. In 1956, you brutally raped a girl on Vancouver Island.
Correct me. Were you convicted of a rape in Vancouver Island in 1956?
But just a minute now.
Ma'am, if he wasn't convicted, I'm not about to talk about it. And you know, I'm not about to take it.
He's talked my parents out of...
No, I can't go into that. I'm sorry, ma'am. Not this morning. No matter what you think of Fox or anything else, I will not take unsubstantiated allegations against anybody on this program, be it Norman Fox or anybody else. I think it's an unfair, nasty thing to do on an open line program. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yep.
All I want to say is it's about time the government, and I feel that the government has to be as responsible for their actions just the same as Mr. Fox has. That's all I have to say.
Good point, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just wondering, just like the previous caller there, why he has to pay anything to this first victim. I don't understand why, after being pardoned for his second conviction, he has to turn around and pay the money.
There's a principle of compensation to victims involved here, and I am certainly in agreement with that principle. However, I'm not in agreement with the government dictating that kind of principle.
But it was politically acceptable and not a bad idea from an overall common sense point of view.
Sure, but Jack, it shouldn't have been brought up at that hearing. It was irrelevant to that particular hearing.
Because that hearing was compensation for the time you had spent wrongfully and illegally in jail. Now, I can see that point, but I can also understand why it was not a bad common sense measure.
Well, I feel that his 12 years that he put in should justify, well, he shouldn't have to pay.
Good point. I can't deny the validity of the point. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have a question for Norman. And just by way of background, one of the earlier callers referred to him as being in PC when he was talking about the cost, and that's protective custody. I've seen in my time in prison protective custody inmates beaten, had urine thrown on them, assaulted with knives, all sorts of things. And I wonder if the public
I didn't do that. Public what?
Realizes that it wasn't a picnic for him in those years, that within prison society he'd be treated with all kinds of scorn. All protective custody inmates are. And just in his 20 years, what sort of things like that did he experience? Because that's more meaningful, the way you're treated while you're in there.
Certainly those things you mentioned happen, and they happen frequently. Beatings, knifings, and so on.
Because you're regarded, the sexual convicts are regarded as the lowest of the low in any maximum security
jail.
That
was something that was created by the system, Jack. When I did 12 years of a life sentence from 1960 to 1972, there was no such thing as protective custody. People did their time in the general population and did the best they could. That protective custody thing was created by the system, by the penitentiary system, under the principle of divide and conquer, so that the general population people were taking out their frustrations and their hatreds on their own kind, rather than directing those towards administration.
Well said, but I can remember protective custody in the BC pen down in the hole, the 10 things, long before 1960.
No.
In the hole in the BC pen?
Under the East Wing, sure. People like Edgecombe, for example, Trombley, and that wasn't protective custody. Trombley was down there for assaulting a guard.
Waslinchuk.
Pardon?
Johnny Waslinchuk.
Waslinchuk.
No, Waslinchuk. Waslinchuk was a different one.
Oh, the fellow that died under there.
The fellow that died down there. Yeah. He died in protective custody.
That wasn't protective custody.
He was in punishment for destroying government property, to wit, a pair of socks valued $1.94.
Excuse me, the first two people that they put in protective custody in the BC penitentiary were the two Meeker brothers.
Meekers? Trombley. I thought Trombley was down there. Never mind, that's history. That's nostalgia.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought me up to date. We shall watch what's interesting. We shall hear from you when the settlement is made and your actions thereafter.
Yes.
My thanks.
Thank you, Jack.
Best of luck.
Thanks very much.
You're going to need it.
Thanks.
Next, Alec Macdonald. He's also going to need it in the mood I'm in this morning, after the break. It's a strange book. I don't really like it. It's Alec Macdonald's My Dear Legs. Why would he write to his varicose veins? It doesn't really make much sense. And it shows that Alec is getting politically old. He'd much rather be in the CCF than in this newfangled NDP. Eh? Eh?
Oh, that's a provocative opening there, Jack.
Some accuracy in it.
No, the Legs is a real person.
I know it is.
You've met him, I think.
I know him, but I mean, it's a funny name. Legs is a young social democrat. Hugh, isn't it?
Hugh Legg, yes.
L-E-G-G.
Yeah.
And you're his political mentor.
Well, he's a good friend of mine.
And you're telling him in this book to get out and get rid of all the union influence in the NDP. Yes, you are.
No, that's
and
too
you
simple.
want them to subscribe to the Regina Manifesto that no CCF government will rest until capitalism is eradicated.
No, that's no. I think that having seen this film, you should advise people to read the book. Because you can't really deal with it in a few sentences, Jack.
Lots of people sell lots of books with a few sentences on Webster.
I know, but anyway.
I'll tell you what we'll do first of all. Let's do the normal Webster nose-to-nose questioning. Because Alec and I, if I have a political friend, it's Alec Macdonald. How can you avoid being a friend of Alec's? He's a great squash player. On any given occasion, there are 3 politicians of different stripes who will get together, take their squash rackets out of the back of the car and go. One is Nowlin, the other is Gardam, and the third is Alec.
No, the other one is that I play squash with is Capozzi.
You mix socially with Herb Capozzi?
No, I mix on the squash court.
You wouldn't mix with
we
him
go
socially,
to it, yeah. No. But he hasn't got quick hands.
He's a good racquetball player.
Yeah, but
Can
not
you beat
quick hands.
Capozzi? Can you beat Capozzi?
Sure.
That's skill, though, isn't it? He is a bit of an elephant on the courts.
Oh, we have a lot of fun.
A lot of fun. Okay. Now, is this your swan song, Alec Macdonald? And are you going to help your leader, whatever his name is? He was here yesterday. Oh, he was terrible. Skelly. Are you going to help him by being one of the old guard, the first to say, I shall not run again when the time comes. I shall leave the field open for fresh, young faces?
Well, I'm close to Bob Skelly, and I'm going to campaign at his side as hard as I can, whether I am a candidate or not.
No. Alec, you know if you're going to run or not. Come on now, witness.
Well,
I said
that I told the people in the riding in August that I would announce about the end of September whether I'd run again. And when I made that announcement, 2 people jumped into the field, which is perfectly fine. And there's now a campaign on for the nomination in Vancouver East, which is good. It's healthy. They're signing up new members, and we've got a... There are unmistakable signs of life in the riding.
I know what you're going to do. You're going to, yes, I know. The penny drops. You've got 2 campaigns in the thing. You will enter modestly as a city member, and if you happen to get the most votes, you'll run again, won't you?
Oh, I'm going to wait and see, Jack. I'm seriously going to make that decision at the end of September. And
not that you haven't made a major contribution to the political life of British Columbia, Alec Macdonald. Now, tell me some of the stories from your book. There's one great story about Barrett and Ian Sinclair.
Oh, well, that's a true story.
I should certainly hope
it
so.
Is, yeah, and I kind of like Ian Sinclair, you know, with the shiny pants and the very tough capitalist manner, that head of the CPR. Now he's a senator, gone to his reward. And
surprising that he would take it, isn't it?
Oh, he's always had a kind of an interest in public things as well as the commercial thing and making a lot of money, so I'm not surprised at all.
What happened between Barrett and yourself and Sinclair on minimum wages for employees in CP hotels?
Oh, Ian Sinclair came storming out in the end of an interview on other subjects. He said, you know, we can't afford to pay the chambermaids in the Empress Hotel the minimum wage. And Dave Barrett hit the roof.
That was $1.75.
And I was sitting there, yeah, it was $1.75 at that time, and he said the hotel may have to close, and Barrett hit the roof, and we had a great time. Said he would take back from the CPR the lands they had taken from the Indians, and Barrett was in his stocking feet, as he often was in those days, as premier.
And, of course, that was the time when the minimum wage went from $1.75 to $2.50.
$2.50, yeah.
See, I have so too read your book.
Yeah.
You show a little bit of toughness, if not venom, against the medical profession. I'm not talking about the jury case. I'm talking about the cost of Medicare.
Oh, I am, yeah. I think it's one of the big unspoken stories, the amount of the increase that we're paying under the medical services plan. You know, it amounts to $200, $300, $400 million in the last 3 or 4, 5
gone
years.
From $350
and nobody
million
talks about it.
I talk about it. It's gone from $350 million to roughly 700 million.
Yeah, you're right.
And you know why? Because on a fee-for-service basis, all they have to do to get as much money as they might desire is to increase the utilization.
Utilization has gone up enormously, and
what would you do?
Well, as I say, I really think we have to look at an alternative system of the delivery of medical care where doctors receive a very good, and they should be among the tops, of course. I have no venom in that respect. But they should receive so much to keep people well. They should have their list of patients, they should work out of a clinic, and they should get a per capita payment to keep people well. And then the better they treat their patients, the more leisure time they have, the more they can take on.
But, you know, the very mention of clinics brings back Saskatchewan and hysteria, and we'll all flee to the United States. That's what they all say.
Oh.
We'll run away at once.
No, they say that, but they won't. No, doctors are public-spirited citizens, but this system that we're locked into at the present time is running out of control financially.
And I happen to think that we, the taxpayers, are entitled to say how many doctors will be given billing numbers, Charter of Rights or no Charter of Rights. We pay the bills.
That's right.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
And if social credit continues, you wouldn't disagree with that?
No. The only thing I was concerned about in Nielsen's proposal was the right of young people who go through medical school to be sure to be allowed to practice their trade.
Every one means $250,000 additional expense for the province.
Yes, I know. But so you control admissions and you control areas. You must.
Next thing. Just a word on the influence of unions. Would you rather see the NDP totally separated from all union influence?
Well, the unions and the NDP are going in the same general direction, which is toward a social democratic society, so I'm not in any sense thinking of divorce. But if you asked my druthers, when I went to Germany, I found all the trade union leaders were members of the Social Democratic Party, and they tithed. They gave a regular monthly payment to that party, but they participated in it as individuals. That would be my druthers.
Quote, Macdonald, when the ICBC was striking his government in 1974, during the strike, the union had a bunch of parading ninnies in front of the legislature.
That's true.
You called your union supporters parading ninnies.
In that particular case, I did, yes. That was a bad strike. The settlement was a bad settlement from the public point of view, in my opinion. And I was sitting there as a cabinet minister at that time, charged with the responsibility of protecting the public interest. There have been some bad settlements. Everybody knows that, but there's also been a lot of good settlements within the trade union movement.
That's when you blew it, of course. You blew your image, not on the Land Act so much as on your extraordinarily... I remember when you doubled the wages of the guy at BCIT from 25 to 50,000. Double the wages. You know, the ferry settlement.
It happens under all governments. It happened under Trudeau with the St. Lawrence settlement. You remember what that set off?
But do you take large part of the responsibility for the short life of an NDP government which has put this province in the hands of some vague populist social creditors for 20 years?
We made some mistakes, no question about it. You learn from life as you go along. We would do better on another occasion.
You blew it the last time.
Oh, we did a lot of good things, too.
Oh,
a lot of things we can be proud of.
Many things you can be proud of, but you blew it. How would you like to have a nag at Alec? Nag at Alec. His dear legs lets us to a young social democrat. You mean a socialist?
Well, I have no objection to the use of that word.
After the break. Go ahead to Ali Macdonald.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Macdonald.
Good morning.
I was just, as an NDPer myself, and hoping that they do return to power. I know you're in a hard position to judge, but try and be honest with me. What do you think will happen in the next election?
I think it's like this at the present time, and I think there's a big undecided vote out there, and I think that we have to, in the NDP, fight a go-get-'em campaign that is thoughtful and with substance, and that if we do that, we'll become the next government, and we'll deserve to, and if we don't, we probably will fail.
Bob Skelly was on this program yesterday, and the few short ones lost every NDP vote in the Queen Charlotte.
I was going to make that my point as well.
You tell him about it yesterday, please. You call her, you tell him.
Well, I couldn't believe the wishy-washy. I mean, Jack almost begged him to take a stand on something.
Right.
And he didn't do it. I couldn't
I'm
believe
sorry,
it.
I didn't
had
see
to leave the room.
I'm sorry I didn't see the program, but Bob is a young, articulate, thoughtful, sincere young man. And anything I can do to help that kind of a person in public life, I will do.
It was a simple issue. And there's no argument that South Moresby must become a wilderness park. There is an active logging island which can easily be excluded, which will give work for 100 men for 20 years. The gutless government in Victoria, while it's trying to make up its mind, refuses even to let them continue their cutting on a temporary basis. 100 jobs, 35 right now, down the drain. And what's his name, tried to take a position as the program came through, but his performance was somewhat, Mark, pathetic.
Well, Jack, I patrolled the streets yesterday, and people talked to me, and they said that you had some very tough questions, which is your job, and that he handled a difficult situation very well. Now, what do you say?
Well, he handled it politically. He didn't...
I didn't see it.
He handled it politically. It was usual evasion that you've given me on many occasions. The usual blame it all on social credit. The usual double talk. He lost every NDP vote of any loggers and their friends and their wives and their relatives in the Charlotte yesterday. Maybe I'm overstating. Am I overstating it?
Well,
I'm probably not. But, you know, I'm getting older like you, Alec, you know, and my irascibility factor increases more simply.
We both will have to watch it.
Yeah, we've got to watch it.
We do, yeah.
No, we've no right to be around at all, really.
We're of an age.
That's right.
You keep asking me every time you see me when I'm going to retire, but we're of an age. I should ask you the same question.
And it's a matter which is on my mind, but I have no intention of retiring. How did...
You have... That's a
None
public
whatsoever.
statement.
Public statement. Go ahead, please. But I'm a politician like you, and you know you can't believe anybody's public statements in this province. Nobody's. As Skelly said to me yesterday, it's all pie in the sky. It's all pie in the sky. Hogwash, hogwash, hogwash. It's all pie in the sky.
I hope you'll be just as rough on Bill Bennett.
Bill Bennett won't even come and talk to me.
Well, then you should be rough on that point.
I'm being rough on you right now, Bill Bennett. You've got no guts at all. Make up your mind. Tell Pelton what to do about Lyle Island, for God's sake.
Yes, good. Good for you. Be rough on everybody.
That's what your boy Skelly should have been saying yesterday, instead of saying, well, social credit, 6 years, a bunch of...
Be fair, Jack. Be rough on everybody.
I've never been unfair.
Me.
Never been unfair in my life.
I know. You're like the guy who's mad all the time. Eh? Fair to everybody.
Go ahead, please. Hello there.
Line 2?
Yes, you're on.
Okay. During the course of your term, the NDP government imposed a tax or taxes on the resource industry, where the mining people claim that as a result of those taxes, they had to shut down all their exploration in this province. Have you any comments on that?
Yes, I do. You know, they created a scare campaign, even though the price of copper was heading up toward $1 a pound and good international prices.
You fixed that?
No, that's the international markets.
I know.
And they created a scare campaign, and in effect, they went on strike.
Okay.
You talk about working people going on strike. Capital sometimes goes on strike to bring down a democratic government that's trying to do justice to ordinary people.
Do you deny, sir, that you imposed a number of new and expensive levies on that money-grubbing mining industry?
We imposed a basic royalty which was very low. It's not the way I would do it again if I had any influence in a government. I would do it on the money they make rather than a royalty system. I think that was a mistake. But I think that the people are entitled to a good return for public services from that kind of mineral wealth.
I think so, too. And you're doing it, Skelly. Skelly
Not
is to
doing
take
a
a
what?
question. Doing a Skelly is to take a question and circle the wagons and try and get back to the point only if you're pushed.
Pardon?
Go ahead from Quesnel.
From Canal.
It said 644 Canal. Is that the wrong one? Oh, my.
Question?
Go ahead from Quesnel.
Yeah, question. Is Mr. Skelly going to be as hard line as he appeared on the program yesterday? Or will he be flexible after the fashion of needs that the NDP used to be?
Oh,
That's a very silly question, ma'am.
No, I don't
It
think
isn't a silly question because an inflexible government, you keep downgrading Mulrooney with his flexibility, but the fact of the matter is, he answers the needs as they really are at the present.
As Mulroney told me, he will respond to any public pressure. In other words, he'll do a social credit, do whatever is necessary to stay in power, regardless of his political philosophy.
I am very concerned that the NDP will be as hard-line and hard-nosed as they portrayed themselves yesterday.
Oh, yes.
Bob Skelly will sit around with his, if he's in government, with cabinet colleagues and caucus and listen to people outside. He's that kind of a person. He's at least a listener. He's not inflexible.
But he's totally inflexible on South Moresby Park because of the NDP resolution that South Moresby must be preserved. And he will not look
Speaking about
at
that, I
saving
feel that
Lyle
a deal's a deal, McNeil. They've given a TFL, they'd better live up to it because they lose government credibility when they do this.
That's the point. Skelly will not go for that. Skelly goes entirely for the removal of that island from logging and into South Moresby.
Well, I don't know about the particular island, but I do know.
You should know.
That one of the big income earners of this province in the future is going to be the tourist trade. And well, you agreed yourself that South Moresby is a valuable natural resource.
It must
in terms
be
of money. In terms of money coming into the province.
Not for tourists, no. Have you ever been up there, Al?
Yes, I have.
90 days.
Beautiful. It's unbelievable.
90 days, half decent weather a year, 100 millimeters of rain, 100 mile-an-hour winds, and only if you've got money. And these hysterical environmentalists from New York, etc., with their fancy boats, they're the only ones who'll see
someday
South
it'll be a
Moresby.
People's Park.
I'm representing the workers today, not you, Alec.
They get Chinooks up there, too.
After all, Alec, you were brought up in a big touring Cadillac. Oh, you used to say goodbye to your father.
You have read part of that book.
Listen to this. Alec, his father was Chief Justice of British Columbia, a very distinguished lawyer. In the porte cochere of the big house in Shaughnessy Heights when Alec was a boy, he, that's his father, sat behind the wheel of a touring Cadillac, top down, brightly buffed, a wicker basket and thermos on the back seat. He wore a baseball cap to break the wind. Alec's mother sat behind him in a kerchief, tastefully tied, the farewell guard of honor drawn up on the steps of this workers' home consisted of the children, the Chinese cook, the cocker spaniel, the gardener, and his wife.
Well, I hope you think...
I think it's
I
admirable.
hope you think it's interesting, but if you read the whole of the chapter, you'll see what his report on the oil and gas industry said in favor of people, and which Duff Patello tried to implement, and then they went on strike against it.
I loved it. But, I mean, you've always been regarded as an intellectual and a bit of a dilettante. Correct?
Well, whatever.
Whatever. But people should know the gracious upbringing you had, unlike the grubby working class upbringings of most of the members of your party, including yours.
Oh, I've tried not to be a hypocrite in life, and if I was born the son of the then Chief Justice of the province, I'm not going to apologize for it.
Of course not. I find it delightful.
The essential thing in life is not to be snobbish, and it's hard not to be. In whatever your rank in life, but you and I both work at that, and I think to some extent we succeed. Do we
our
not?
best.
Do we not?
We do our best. I don't know how.
Yeah.
A very short segment with Ali after the break. Got to wrap it up I hate to admit that politicians are friends, but you're a friend of mine. Remember the time in Victoria when we were doing the agricultural freeze?
Yeah.
And Barrett and I said, where's the appeal provision?
Oh, yes.
And you had just come into my little studio in the Empress, and Barrett turned to you and shouted, where's the appeal provision? And you scratched your head and said, I think we forgot to put that in.
And I went back to that office after that thing, and I worked as hard as I've ever worked in my life, with papers spread all over the floor, and it took 3 weeks to reproduce a proper Agricultural Protection Act.
That was great fun in those days. I used to do programs about your new plans, and then Dunsky would run in saying, what did the minister say? And I would say, he said, oh, God, we'll have to change the act. That happened in Mincombe.
Well, the darn thing got past me. I was Attorney General, but the first draft of the act got past me into the legislature without going through my office. We corrected those things as we went along.
Oh, you certainly did.
We had to.
Yeah. Go ahead, please. But oh, that's the wrong one. I'm not informed this morning. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Macdonald.
Yes, sir.
This morning I received some mail from the NDP.
Yes.
Now, with Skelly's actions yesterday, I didn't even open it. I tore it up and threw it away, and I'm going to do the same thing with my membership card. The man is appalling. He's full of hogwash.
Oh, my goodness, I want you to think a little more about what you're saying.
Yeah, Alex.
Get some Hansard, read his speeches. He's thoughtful.
Alec, you're filling time.
He's
I want to
young,
see how
he's
many.
intelligent.
I want to
asked for the answer from your office and sent money to pay for them, and they won't send them to me.
Well, phone me up or write to me, and I'll send you some of his speeches.
Thank you for your call, sir.
Some of them are very good indeed.
I treasured your call. Oh, yours I don't, too. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
That's you, sir.
Mr. Macdonald,
Yes?
you're a very strong person, I call a limousine socialist.
I don't mind.
But here's the point. Now, you can run in a safe riding. Why don't you put your ass on the line and run in your own riding out there in Point Grey and take on the champions and just do it.
Well, Jack and I know that there's a really serious question whether I should run again at all.
But that might be a good way to sacrifice you, to run you in Point Grey.
Yeah.
Against McGeer. That would bring out the crowd.
I'd lose a lot more shoe leather, you mean, out there.
No, don't. Just go to meetings.
Right?
But I mean, you running against McGeer and Garden would be good fun. You know, instead of your usual hardy annual socialists who don't have a hope in hell in Point Grey. That's a good idea, sir.
Well, think about it, Jack.
I'll advise him to do it. He loves my advice. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Macdonald, I was wondering if you support Expo, and another thing, I also want to know if you would agree that the high cost of union labor in BC is making us uncompetitive in outside markets.
Short answers, please.
Well, there are two things. Expo's here, eh? It's a British Columbia thing that we have invested in as a whole people. Therefore, we support it. We, as an NDP, wouldn't have done it that way.
No, should you? No, should you? I'm not happy with some aspects of Expo,
yes, okay.
but I'm now behind it 100%
Well, we've got to be patriotic when we have our own money in there. We've got to make a success of the fair.
We've
also got to criticize it where it's wrong in order to make it better.
Yeah. And I think Marjorie Nichols has done a hell of a job.
Well, I think criticism makes things stronger. That's
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yep.
Yeah, Mr. Webster, yesterday I was totally embarrassed to say that I'm an NDP when I heard that Bob Skelly. I was so annoyed. You were all right on that. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, ma'am. Right. I want you to get the message, Alec. Go ahead. I may be doing you a favor. Go ahead, please.
I wanted to let you know that watching your program yesterday, it's hard to figure out who was running it. The View. Oh.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not cutting you off. Report that line out of order. Can't get the thing. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Morning, Alex.
Good morning.
A laugh for you, Jack.
Yes.
I think yesterday all your troubles started when the girls put the powder on your guest and forgot to wipe better off his glasses. I think that's where the problem started.
Where did your problem start this morning? Go ahead.
I always take mine off, so I'll be.
Go ahead, please. Put them back on. You look better with them on. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Macdonald.
Good morning.
This is sort of changing the subject a little bit.
Okay.
I want to know what you think Mr. Bennett's pending actions will be regarding BCG EU employees.
Okay, ma'am, we're going to have to foreshorten that with this question from me. BCG EU want a whistleblowers bill to protect all civil servants who give what they believe to be graft, corruption, mismanagement, or anything to the media or the opposition. Is that a desirable bill?
You mean unlimited power to leak information to the media? Unlimited?
Yes.
In a legal form?
They've presented a draft bill.
Yes. I think that leaks are salutary, and they expose things that otherwise would be hidden.
But you wouldn't like...
But I'm not sure that you need to put it into a form of law. I think it should happen on an informal basis.
So do I. My dear legs, $1.95? What is it?
It's $7.95, but to old friends like you, for this week only, $8.
Best of luck, Alec. We'll hear at the end of the month what you're going to do, because on your actions will depend what other old-timers who are thinking of retirement, about 6 of them, should also do. give Skelly a chance with some new blood. My thanks to Alan Macdonald. Next, I better get my serious face on. It's Claire Culhane after the break. Claire Culhane is a Canadian phenomenon. She's tough, she's a bit biased, she's a fighter, you can't push her back. She's barred from prisons, not as an inmate, she's barred from prisons as a social activist who takes the most active role in correcting what she sees, in many cases she's right, as injustices. So I presume now under the new Tory government you have no more hope now of ever getting into the prisons than you did under the Liberals.
Correction, not all prisons, only in BC. I get in across country, every prison across country so far. But in BC I get into only 2. 1 medium and 1 minimum. And I never know from one day to the next whether that's going to hold.
In other words, there's not a blanket ban on you all across the nation.
Each warden has the individual right to decide for himself.
What are the reasons? You tell me the reasons why they won't let you into prisons
here. Well, the
here.
official reason is in the best welfare of the institution, that they don't think I can contribute to the rehabilitation of prisoners, excepting I help to get them out. So basically that's what it is. They're not prepared to subject themselves to the scrutiny of anybody critical.
What do you do in a prison to which you are given admission?
Only go and visit prisoners. And some prisons I can visit 15 in 4 days, a top security prison in Canada, and depending on the warden, other prisons in BC, they say, you're not coming in here.
Which of the 2 you're barred from in British Columbia?
No, the only 2 I'm allowed in are William Head and Ferndale. Every other one I'm out.
William Head being
in Victoria,
medium security. And Ferndale?
It's the minimum in Fraser Valley.
You're not allowed into any of the heavy prisons?
No.
Not allowed into Kent?
Mission, Matsui, RPC, the whole bit. But I used to go in.
I first met you 15 years ago when you came back from running a hospital in Vietnam.
Right.
And at that time your campaign was the abominable treatment of people being kept in cages by whom?
By the South Vietnamese government. But that isn't what I was campaigning about. I was campaigning about what Canada was doing in Vietnam. And if you remember, I wrote a book called Why is Canada in Vietnam? The Truth About Our Foreign Aid.
You were a very early protester in that.
Right.
Then this is your life, Claire Culhane. What was your biggest prison battle in which you were ever involved in British Columbia?
Well, I was on the Citizen Advisory Committee at the BC Pen in 1976 when a hostage-taking took place, and we were invited to come in and observe so there wouldn't be another Mary Steinhauser, the woman who was killed the year before, a social worker. And I spent the whole 80 hours inside with them at the time.
Now, I remember the Steinhauser case very lucidly indeed. At least I hope I do. Steinhauser and another woman whose name escapes me, and Andy Bruce.
Yeah. Well, Andy Bruce and 3 prisoners arranged to take hostage of about, I think, 8 staff members because they were going to be put back into solitary confinement, which has since been ruled by the courts as cruel and unusual punishment, but it doesn't mean it's changed.
They've still got the penthouse on the top of the building.
Well, the BC Pen's been ripped down, but they have it everywhere else.
This
isn't your day.
They still have well, I can always remember the hole in the pen, and I remember Hall's penthouse, and I remember how it was refined, and I saw it last when they decided to knock it down.
But what doesn't matter is that the pen was knocked down, but every prison in Canada. You come with me to every prison in Canada, and what I'm saying now is a good statement that you've given me an opening for, is that we could produce a Norman Fox case in every prison and call my bluff. And nobody's calling my bluff because I could tell you just off the top of my head, Patrick Doole, Tom Sofano, man that was accused of a murder in Winnipeg when he was not there. I could tell you about Wallace Dumont, a native Indian who was saw a guy in a snowbank. And because he had a criminal record, he got 4 years for having presumably assaulted and robbed him. I could tell you about Gary Como in Collins Bay, who was sitting next to another person in a pub. They were bikers, and that's what got him. Someone shot this man. The bullet went through his chin into Gary's shoulder, out his back, and I've seen the scars, and they took the bullet to ballistic expert to the courts, and he's doing 25 years for killing him. I can go on, and I'm saying, call my bluff. Let's get all the Norm Foxes out of prison. That's why I'm not very popular.
I'm not going to say I disbelieve you, because I have a good knowledge of the weaknesses of the system and what has and can happen. You're telling me in not every prison.
Every prison in this country, I'm saying, let's go and see. Let's go and see. Nobody should believe me, but let's go and see.
Many years ago, I had a lot to do with prisoners and people on the wrong side of the law. And when you go out to jail, as I used to do in those days, you never could find anybody who said, yes, I was wrong, I did it, I got my sentence legitimately.
That could be, but I'm saying let's do it in a sensible way. Let's start with a community prison board like we have hospital boards or education boards, where people are concerned about the prison. Let's have someone from that group be allowed to enter a prison on a regular, responsible manner, 9 to 5, monitor what's going on and be accountable to the community, not to the Solicitor General, like the Citizens Advisory Committee is.
I find it hard to disagree with that. Do you tell any of these stories in this?
I've got it all lined up, a whole scenario, and stories quoted from Amnesty International where prisoners in Archambault, after the horrible murders that took place there, how they were tortured. And that has been confirmed by 3 international bodies. We don't have to read about, Argentina when we find out that the water torture that I thought I would only see in Vietnam, in Canada, where a prisoner's face is held in a toilet bowl, where I've seen the marks on a prisoner's shoulders were hoisted up on poles, left to hang until he nearly died.
In Archambault?
In Archambault. And this is documented.
Are the prisons generally in French Canada more brutal than the prisons in the rest of the country?
Everything's a matter of degree. I won't go to bat for or against any prison. It's the prison system that needs to be abolished. And I'm an abolitionist.
God knows there are lots of things wrong with the prison system. The worst thing being that people who are non-violent get sentences which are too long. Am I not correct?
Well, it's an industry, Jack. $4.5 billion industry. Look at all the vested interest that goes into maintaining a prison system.
But would it not be better to have short, sharp sentences?
Yep, right on. And no parole.
No parole. When you're out, you're out. Clean. There's nobody looking over your back.
Exactly.
I've always thought that mandatory parole is one thing that will drive a reasonably decent guy around the bag.
But don't confuse that with mandatory supervision.
Mandatory supervision.
No, but don't confuse it with that, because that means giving you your last third of your sentence free, which originally, before 1970, you did your 2/3 and you were out free. Now you do your 2/3 and you're still in prison, because when you're on the street being monitored by the parole system, you're still in prison.
Your call's now to Claire Culhane. She's got friends and she's got enemies, and you can't deny the fact that she's a fighter par excellence. That's my French exhausted. After the break. Time, will you please? Go ahead to Claire Culhane, author of the book Still Barred from Prison. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment about the book. I've read the book, and I'd like to say that I hope Claire Culhane continues to expose the atrocities that exist in the Canadian criminal justice system, and especially in prisons.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, a friend of mine got 14 years, and how do I get him out? He got 14 years for 2 rapes, and I don't think he even did it. He's a good friend of mine, Peter Farrell.
Well, where did he get the time? Where did he get
He should be out of there, I think, because it's bad.
But then, see, that's the case. We can't possibly make any judgment on his buddy phoning and saying
Actually, he got 20 years altogether.
Well, let me be brutal. Maybe he should have done. But what would you recommend this friend do?
First of all, I asked him...
What did he do?
No, I'm asking Claire to tell you what you should be doing now. Hold on.
I get calls like this all the time, and the first thing is to get together with the person, see how far the legal process has worked, and then if they have enough evidence, enough proof, then we say, let's go to the media. Frankly, you exhaust all your legal channels, and then you don't stop. Actually, I'm giving workshops on nonviolent civil disobedience at prison gates. That's the That's the last part of the game.
Where do you
plan.
give these workshops? Non-violent civil disobedience and prison games?
At international conferences on the abolition of prisons. One in Toronto in '83, one in Amsterdam last June.
Do what you're told. Where do they get in touch with you, Claire? Because you might look at this case and say, look, you're full of wind.
All right, but I'm willing to see what I can do. 873-3070. Phone me and we'll talk about it.
873-3070. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster.
Yes.
Yes, I happen to be one of the people of the jail system at one time. And there is times where I have done things definitely, and I deserve what I got. But being inside there has been things that have happened inside that weren't very nice, just like the lady speaking of here, to the way of beatings with rubber hoses, water tortures, and you're in jail already paying for your crime. I don't see why you should have to put up with that kind of nonsense from people I don't believe should be there.
How long have you been out?
I've been out for about 8-9 years, and I finally got a pardon.
There you are.
That's support for you, Claire.
I want to add, I'm not writing any more books. I want to add that what's even worse and people don't realize than physical torture is a psychological punishment. You know, people don't come out showing that they're crippled in their head.
I know. Go ahead, please. Where are you?
Hello, Jack.
That's right. That's you. Speak up.
Hello, Jack. Good morning, Jack. Good morning, Claire.
Good morning. Come on.
Can you not hear me talking to you? Good morning, Jack. Good morning,
I hear
Claire.
you, Jack. No, I'm very sympathetic to what Claire has to say.
Turn down your television. It's driving you into instant madness.
All right. Just a moment, Jack.
7 seconds, you see, and it gives you instant confusion.
Yeah.
But the one exception I find to your arguments this morning is that you're both too leftist, too socialistic. Claire, what do you feel about capital punishment?
Of course.
I've been in jail as well as the man before me. But what do you think about executing? There are a lot of bad people in the system.
I'm against capital punishment because that's more vicious and more cruel and more inhumane than any other part of our system.
But there are bad people.
There are bad people, but you don't kick people when they're bad and they're down. You find ways to find out what happened to them. You see, I just heard of an 8-year-old prostitute who doing time in a home, getting good counseling, and when her time is up, she's back out on the street because they don't have the funding for follow-up.
What the devil, Claire, has
that has to do,
prostitute got to do with some animal like Olson?
But just a minute, I'm not.
Claire,
that's got nothing to do
let
with
me
capital
talk,
punishment.
I've had a dog that used to nuzzle up and lick my face, and 4 years later was biting me in the ankles.
All right, well, let's deal with problems, but killing people to teach them not to kill, is a good old saying, doesn't solve it.
But just a minute. When you read and learn of the ghastly atrocities done by a man who is not insane, doesn't your instinct say, string him up?
No, because that's giving the weapon to people that would then string up other people.
Yeah.
I say put him away for life. Then you would only need one prison in the whole country to put away those kind of people and keep them there.
I mean, he's the one guy with whom my anti-capitalist punishment sentiments disappeared very rapidly.
But find out how he's working a deal. He's probably got more in the system than they've got on him.
Well, we all know the doubts about Mr. Olson, but we know that he killed a hell of a lot of people in the most gruesome way. And to defend him against capital punishment in any group of Canadians is almost intolerable and impossible.
But that's falling into the trap of using capital punishment.
Maybe we could do one or two.
No. Oh, you can't though, Jack. You're not the one that's going to decide.
Well,
that's
if I
the
was,
problem.
I'd make up my mind, I'll tell you that. I think. Where am I going?
Come on.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, good morning. I'd just like to say before I get to my point that Claire Culhane came to visit me in Chilliwack in 1976, and they told her they didn't have washroom facilities for her, so they really don't like her. But anyway, and last October I did a live news show with CBC and the Regina, Saskatchewan City Policeman, Chief of Police, on mandatory supervision and capital punishment. I was just released on mandatory. The next morning, I was suspended on my mandatory and sent back to the penitentiary for breaking the condition of drinking on mandatory supervision. 4 months later, I was released, of course, because I didn't have that drinking condition, but it took 4 months and work from CBC and friends in the community because there's no body to review these things. They just said, that's it, you broke a condition, get back in a cage for 4 months.
And that was the night when you were on with the chief of police, you had a drink.
Pardon me?
That was the night you were on the radio, CBC, with the chief of police?
Yeah, we did a TV show on that, and the next morning the parole service suspended my mandatory supervision, saying I broke the condition of drinking that night before the TV show, and they had some secret witness who said it, but 4 months later they realized that I didn't even have that drinking condition.
That's why we have prisoners' rights group.
Yeah, that's right.
But there's no, they just isolate you, they put you in segregation.
And was that the place where they wouldn't let Claire go to the washroom?
No, that was in Chilliwack years ago,
That was
this was in...
This is to make you leave sooner.
Yeah.
They won't give you a washroom to use.
Well, they tried anyway.
Oh, that's
And the people, I
It
say.
didn't work.
What did you do, go to men's?
I saved it.
You saved it. That's a good human touch. Good. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yeah.
I just wondered how Claire felt about maybe turning the penitentiary service over to the military. I did 21 days in Gagetown.
Telling the
11
prison...
years later, I wasn't going back, I'll tell you. I mean, the country club effect we have in Maskely is ridiculous. I was there.
Yeah, you're saying give it to the military and people won't go back again.
We want to believe it. Yes, staff, no staff, Mr. Speak staff, you know.
Okay, we've only got a moment here.
I'm an abolitionist. I don't see that prisons solve anything. I think we have to look to living in a caring society. I think we have to abolish poverty and wars
we're gonna
and
leave it there.
prisons.
Claire Culhane, still bad from prison. And if they won't let you use a washroom, for goodness sake, phone me from the jail.
Oh,
the ones
thank
you
you
get
so
into.
much.
And I'll work for your rights after the break. Seconds out of the ring for the second round in the fight to save Lyle Island from the Island Protection Society. Colleen McCrory, its savior, will be here, its spokesman will be here tomorrow, as will Graham Lee, the independent MLA for Prince Rupert. He's fighting against Skelly's party. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. precisely. The battle to save Lyle Island, Part 2, 9 a.m. precisely.